What's up, my friends, and welcome into another edition of the All Nittany Lion podcast here on PHLY. Thanks so much for hanging out with us once again. It's myself, Tyler Zulli, and Jason Cabinda. No Adam Telefero today. Unfortunately, he had some prior obligations, so we'll check back in with Adam next week. We've got a ton to get into, despite the fact that Penn State didn't play last weekend. But they do play this weekend, and it's a big game, a conference game, of course, as most games are at this point, against Wisconsin. And, of course, we're going to start to peek ahead to Ohio State just a little bit. We'll do it all in the next hour or so here on the Nittany Lion podcast. But first and foremost, as always, Jason, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Love being on here, man. Appreciate you, and love seeing you each week, man. Let's get it.
No game last week, so we can kind of jump into the preview of Wisconsin. We're going to play mid-season superlative. So Penn State now, of course, is 6 games into the regular season. 7 games into the regular season? Am I?
With the bye week, yeah.
Right. Yes. So
yeah, 6-0, but we've got a bye week, and this is the second one, I think.
Midway through the schedule, we're going to play some mid-season superlatives later in the show. I'll ask you a couple of questions off the cuff. You just give me an answer that comes to your head. You can dive deep into it, or we can leave it as it is. We'll play that game a little bit later in the show. Of course, we'll break down the Wisconsin game as well. We're going to talk about a couple of different teams throughout college football. But I wanted to start with this today because I think that there is a conversation to be had, and I don't think that this is a conversation that surrounds, well, you guys are Penn Staters, so of course you're going to say yes to this question. But the question is, Penn State is 6-0 and remains at number 3 in the AP polls this week after a bye last week. So Georgia takes down Texas, so Texas is no longer undefeated. Oregon slides up to the number 1 spot, but Georgia slides into the number 2 spot behind Oregon, and Penn State is still the number 3 team in the country. I think it's a pretty simple question with a much more complex answer to it. But Jason, we'll just start overarchingly as we kind of normally do. Should Penn State be the number 2 team in the country this week?
Yes, there's no question about it. I mean, we're undefeated at the end of the day. I don't think there's ever been a time in college football where the SEC and Big Ten have been closer in terms of arguing which conference is the best conference. That shows in the AP poll week in and week out. I mean, I don't see why Penn State shouldn't be the best team right now. Georgia beat a Texas team, but that Texas team looked like a team that was choking. I mean, quarterbacks getting benched. I mean, they just didn't show up and played who we thought Texas was going to be this year in their big moment. So I don't think it I get that they were number 1, but I just don't feel like that justifies Georgia skipping an undefeated team to the number 2 spot. It just doesn't.
So Georgia has wins against Clemson and now, of course, against Texas on the road. They did lose to Alabama on the road, who is a good team. But as we've talked about, it kind of one of those teams where the losses are maybe starting to mount a little bit for Jalen Milroe and Kellen DeBoer and that Alabama team. Still a very good football team, but they do have 2 losses now on the season. And so every time a loss gets added to your record, a win against that team starts to maybe crumble a little bit. And maybe in Alabama's case, it doesn't, or Georgia's case, it doesn't. In the SEC's case, and as a whole, apparently, it doesn't. They do have 2 very, very quality wins. They do still have a couple of good teams left to play. I believe they still have Tennessee and Ole Miss on their schedule. Of course, Penn State has Wisconsin this week. They've got Ohio State next week. So good teams in their own right. Maybe not Wisconsin to the level of Tennessee and Ole Miss. But Georgia has held opponents to 15 points or less in 5 of their 7 games this year. I think that there has to maybe be a separator in this conversation where I believe that Georgia right now is a better football team than Penn State, top to bottom. However, the conversation can be had. Penn State is indeed undefeated and Georgia is not. Now, granted, that doesn't work for every team because, of course, you have a couple of teams in the American who are undefeated, a couple of teams maybe in a non-Power 5, and that conversation shifts a little bit. But when you have a Big Ten team and an SEC team, and one is 6-0 and the other is 5-1, I think logic would tend to dictate that the 6-0 team would be the team that is higher in the seedings. Obviously, the committee doesn't feel that way, as Georgia is number 2. So are you separating the fact that maybe Georgia is a better football team to the fact that Penn State is 6-0?
I mean, obviously, you would hope that when the judges go out here and make these polls, that at the end of the day, that's what they're deciding is who they feel the better team is. And it's not about records, or shouldn't necessarily all come down to records, because then we're going to have a conversation about the MAC schools and schools of lower conferences, and them being 12-0 compared to a 1-loss, 2-loss SEC or Big Ten team. That's a whole other conversation. So I get it. I just feel like this Penn State team has shown that it's built for the long term. I think this team is built for December football. They're tough. It's carrying a run game well week in and week out. Got 2 studs, a whole offensive line that's very tough and gritty. A quarterback that's showing us that he's taking the next big leap in his career. I just think there's just too many good things going for Penn State right now. And then the steady defense that, we've always come to know, year in and year out, and kind of what the heartbeat of this team has always been. So I just think there's too many things pointing to the fact that Penn State is really legit and looking like it's going to take the next step that we've been waiting on for, a few years now.
So there are currently, Penn State is one of 6 teams that are undefeated, ranked in the top 25. Penn State, of course, is the highest at 3. Miami is 7-0. They sit at 6. Iowa State and BYU are 10 and 11. They're both 7-0. Indiana is 7-0 at 13. We're going to talk about them throughout the show as well. Pitt is 6-0, and they're ranked 19th. And then, of course, Army and Navy are 23 and 24. They're 7-0 and 6-0, respectfully. So it's always going to be a conversation of record versus merit versus the best team. And I know that there's a conglomerate of fans that say the 4 best team, back when it was a 4-team playoff, the 4 best teams should get in. There's a conglomerate of fans that say the 4 most deserving teams should get in. And that's where the argument kind of last year resided with Florida State. Florida State was undefeated. Florida State was definitively not one of the 4 best teams in college football. So if you play with the argument that it should be the 4 most deserving teams, then Florida State should have been in the playoff last year. I think most of us watched Florida State and said, yes, they were undefeated. Yes, they could only do what they could do and win the games on their schedule. But there's flaws on this team. They're not as good as per se a Georgia or a Bama or whomever else may, have been in the argument. Jordan Travis was playing at an elite level until his injury. And maybe if Jordan Travis was healthy last year, it was a different conversation. But the moment that he went down, I think the committee was just like, we don't want you to lose because we're not rooting for anybody, but you would make our jobs a whole heck of a lot easier if you would lose.
Yeah, and to me, I think like that's the point of having conferences to begin with that represent all kinds of different areas of the country and things of that nature, is that at the end of the day, your schedule allows you to control what you can control. And whoever ends up being the top dog in that conference by record, that's who gets to represent that conference. But like the point of having conferences and the point of doing a playoff and, seeing who the best in the entire country is the fact that we get to represent all these different conferences and what the top of each different conference is. And that's the reason why I feel like the record should matter, because it's like that's kind of how it's set up and was made to work out, in my opinion. It wasn't made to truly come down to true opinion and all right, who do we think at the end of the day is the better team or who would win in this game. It's more so like, look, the best of this conference, the best of this conference, the best of this conference. We're all going to see what happens at the end. I think.
And as you mentioned, the top 4 were the 4 conference winners from the 4 big conferences remaining. Of course, that is the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 are going to get automatic buys in the first round, and then the other 8 will come from at-large bids. Plus, the highest ranked group of 5 team will also get a bid as well. I believe right now, and if I had to go back just very, very quickly to try to find
Boise State.
Who's that?
Is that Boise State right now?
It is Boise State, unless so. I don't know how. I have to go back and check. I don't know how the independent works versus the group of 5, because Notre Dame.
Oh, like Notre Dame, yeah. I
Is
didn't think about
61,
that.
so it may be them. But Boise State is the highest ranked conference,
We're ready
non-Power
for you to
5
join a
conference.
conference, Notre Dame. We're tired of doing this every year.
We've had, we could have that conversation for 4 hours as to why that they should just join the ACC and get it over with. But we have a lot to get into today, so I'd love your thoughts, and I'd love to get everybody else's thoughts in the comment section. Penn State is ranked 3rd. They're 6-0. Georgia is ranked ahead of them. They're a 1-loss team. Should Georgia be the number 2 team in the country, or should it be Penn State because of the 6-0 record? So we'll dive into a whole bunch of that in further detail, but that was just a quick conversation piece that I wanted to get into before we dove into our deeper conversation, which was breaking down Wisconsin. And we're going to do that in just a second. But first, let me tell you about some of our friends over at Shady Rays. I've been telling you about Shady Rays now for a while because they are the only sunglass company that I would recommend, and over 300,000 people tend to agree with me because they have all offered 5-star ratings. The shades have durable frames, they're crystal clear optics, so it makes it your perfect choice for whatever outdoor activity it is you're doing, whether you're going to a football game, you're tailgating, you're on a hike, you're on an adventure, you're going out with the family for some family time. The Shady Rays are good for you just in about every season. Like today, it's unseasonably warm. I need my Shady Rays because, I would be done for if it weren't for my Shady Rays. And they've got hundreds of options to choose from. So you are absolutely bound to find the perfect pair that you're looking for. And the best thing about Shady Rays is they are backed by the most insane lost or broken replacement guarantee in the eyewear industry. If you don't love your shades, you can exchange a new pair risk-free for 30 days. You can even return them worry-free up to 30 days. So there's no risk to you when you shop. And exclusively for all of our listeners right now, Shady Rays is giving out the best deal of the season. Head on over to shadyrays.com and use PHLY as the promo code for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades that are rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. And you may be outside and it may be time to do some work on your house and you realize, I can't quite do what I'm looking for. That's okay, because our friends over at Ace, that is exactly what they are here for. Ace is not just the place with the helpful hardware folks, but they're also the place with the helpful home service and repair folks as well. If you've got a leaky pipe, you've got an air conditioning issue, you have a faucet problem. I currently in my apartment have a faucet problem. The front is leaking. We got to try to figure out what the problem is. But if you're looking for plumbing, heating, cooling, exhaust, as we said, faucets, bathrooms, whatever the case may be, Ace has you covered. They've got the trusted pros to keep your home running all year long. That's Ace Hardware Home Services. They bring helpful home, and the helpful that you love from the store will now come right to your front door. So visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at www.acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next project today. So it's time to preview Wisconsin because we have no game to talk about last week, so we can dedicate a bulk of our show to the Wisconsin Badgers. So Penn State heads on over to Camp Randall, which has become a notorious, or has been for a long time, a notoriously difficult place to play. Wisconsin comes into this one at 5-2. They're 3-1 in the Big Ten. And yes, they have some lopsided losses this year, a big loss to Bama, a loss to USC. But Jason, I didn't realize how badly they have beaten their opponents over the last 3 weeks. Now, it has been Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern, 3 teams that you should beat as a good football team. They've outscored those 3 teams in the last 3 weeks 117-16. This is a much different Wisconsin team, I think, than what we saw just a few weeks ago when they got beat pretty handily by Alabama. I think your mic might be muted.
Sorry, but
good.
And let's not forget, this team has gone through a lot of adversity. They lost Tyler Van Dyke at the beginning of the season, who they thought was going to be their starting guy. Now this kid, Braedyn Locke, comes in. He coughs it up a few times. Doesn't look great in the first couple games. They lose some big ones. Some that they kind of actually started the games winning and end up losing by multiple scores. And then these past 3 weeks, he's starting to find a rhythm with this Kahuna kid out there, Vinny Anthony on the outside. I mean, they got some receivers and a couple of skill players that can make this offense go. And Locke is starting to really, get a chemistry with these 2 receivers. Tyree Walker's been looking really good the past few games. He's rushed for over 200 in a couple games this year. So, they're starting to find their, Wisconsin culture and kind of what makes their team them. They're finding that again, and their defense is starting to hang in and play tough.
So before we dive into, because I want to talk about Locke, you brought up Walker. Vinny Anthony is a big name to consider, especially with the injuries the Penn State secondary has sustained over the season. I want to ask you, I believe you did, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you had an opportunity to play at Camp Randall in your collegiate career, correct?
No, I actually didn't. No.
Okay, never mind. Then my question is mute. I thought you guys did the one.
We just played them the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis.
That's right. Yeah. Notoriously difficult place to play. So I'm sure you've heard the stories then, much like all of us have, about how it's loud. There's a reason I made the thumbnail today jump around, because they've made that kind of their third into the fourth calling card. It's a Big Ten loud, raucous, collection of fans.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. And I think that's what makes this an even more difficult game, is the fact that, like, this isn't a team we're really used to playing during the regular season. When I was there in my 4 years, we never played them once during the regular season, only that Big Ten championship game. So this isn't a team that comes up every single year in preparation and, we're super keeping up with them and what they're doing, So I hate to use the words trap game, but I didn't feel like the UCLA game was a trap game. This game, to me, night game on the road in Madison, tough environment, a team that's caught in some fire and starting to gain some confidence in these past 3 weeks. This has the makings and the feelings of a trap game to me.
You guys always talk about it. You and Adam talk each and every week. James Franklin harps on it 1 week at a time, any given Saturday. And there's good reason as to why you do it, because next week we know what's coming. We know Ohio State is down the road, just 10 days away, and everybody's thinking about that game. By the way, we will talk about the fact that it is a noon kickoff, and I don't think there's a single fan that is excited about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But you brought up Braedyn Locke, who did replace Tyler Van Dyke after he gets suffers the season-ending knee injury. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards since he's taken over as the starter, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He recently became the first Wisconsin quarterback to throw for over 300 yards in a Big Ten game since Joel Stave did it in 2015. Now, I know Wisconsin's always been a traditional run the football, big guys up front, good offensive line, play good defense type of school. Yeah. But in today's collegiate game, which, there's more passing than ever before. I think the college and the NFL ranks are fairly close in terms of like mirroring offenses at times and things like that. That was kind of stunning to me to see that they haven't had a 300-yard passer in conference play in almost a decade.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that stat either. And Wisconsin's had a couple of quarterbacks. It's not like haven't had anybody in that span. Now, they've had a couple of guys. So to see that stat, that's pretty remarkable.
So I was just Twitter searching, because I like to see what other outlets, podcasts, and things like that, what fans talk about prior to the game. I was listening to Luke Fickell, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I was listening to the guys on the Locked On Wisconsin podcast, and they've pointed out now that he has kind of been an enigma, because at times he's been sharp, he's been poised. He is apparently super, super smart and has taken to the playbook since transferring from Mississippi State like it's, nothing. But the Locked On guys with Wisconsin pointed out that he has fumbled the football within the pocket like 4 or 5 times over the last, handful of weeks. He's also thrown 5 interceptions this year. So he almost, they marvel at the big plays, and there have been some legit, like, impressive drives from Locke and from this Wisconsin offense. And then there are times where it almost feels like he slips back into a weird, like a slip up role where all of a sudden he's not protecting the football. His blind side is really causing him problems. It's a weird dynamic for a quarterback who has played really well at times this year.
Yeah, I literally have that written down in my notes. I have it down. Locke isn't super accurate. He will cough it up. It's literally what I put down in my notes. And whether that's through a pick or through putting the ball on the ground, he tends to do that. I mean, he's still obviously gelling with this offense. They expected TVD, Tyler Van Dyke, to be their quarterback this year. So, I try to give him some grace from that perspective. But I definitely think that this is a guy that we can get after and expose in this game and put pressure on, and he's going to cough it up and be flustered. Now, they'll have the home crowd advantage, and that from that standpoint, it won't have Beaver Stadium screaming at them while they're trying to accomplish that. But I know our fans travel well, and I know it's going to be a hell of an environment, and we're going to find ways to fluster this guy.
So you mentioned a couple other players, so I would love to talk about them. Vinny Anthony is one that stood out to me because I think that Ryan Williams, rightfully so, the 17-year-old receiver from Alabama, gets all the hype for his, yards per catch numbers and his spectacular catches. And the kid is legit already. And to be 17 and playing in Alabama and to be contributing is a massive accomplishment. But Vinny Anthony is kind of one of the receivers that's gone under the radar and has similar numbers. He has 13 catches and over 310 receiving yards. He's averaging 24 plus yards per catch. And this is what I thought was the funniest, because we make these jokes sometimes that Locke and Anthony were kind of quoted back and forth as each other. And they basically have like a bleep it, Anthony's down there somewhere mentality.
Yeah.
And it's true, but it can be super effective when you have a deep route, deep threat, playmaker type of receiver like that, and your quarterback who has innate trust in him.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of those guys are those type of receivers. They're big play guys. When I was looking at their stat lines, I remember one game, Kekuta had like 6 for 134 and 2 touchdowns. Like, those are the type of players that they are: big, explosive. They get their big plays in chunks. That's how their offense operates right now. And they're the kind of guys where when they get the ball, anything can happen. They can make guys miss. They can get a ton of yak yards and be explosive. So those are two guys that are going to give us a challenge on defense for sure. And I think that's why it's going to be imperative for our defense and our D-line to make sure we're pressuring this quarterback all day long, because this guy's been building a repertoire with these two receivers over the past few weeks where they're not just making, scheme throws, but they're starting to make routine throws now and things of that nature. And that's when you gotta disrupt the timing and disrupt that chemistry that they have between each other.
So I always love to play the game with you and Adam of like get inside the mind of Tom Allen. And if you have a deep ball threat like that, and you have two good receivers really, and a running back who's done a really nice job, who we'll get to in a bit, how do you scheme for, how do you defend for the deep ball threat? Like, yes, it's one thing to have good athletes to run step for step with them, but how do you defend that? Do you run a safety over the top? Do you run more bracket type coverage? What's your game plan when you have a deep ball threat like that at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I mean, you run a lot of open safety coverage. You run a lot of cover 2, cover 4, a lot of coverages where you have 2 high safeties over the tops on both halves of the field. The only problem with doing that is you lose a guy inside of the box, and against a team like Wisconsin that runs the ball traditionally well, and you already know that that's kind of their mantra and what they try to do from an identity standpoint. Now you got to gauge, okay, how much do I want to be in 2 high safety, and how much do we want to be in cover 3 and cover 1 playing man, but having 8 in the box and shoring up in the run game and having every gap covered. It's going to be a big. I remember when I played Wisconsin, that Big Ten championship game, that had to be the biggest O-line I may have ever played against in my career, including the NFL. I mean, I don't think they had a guy below 6'7" from center all the way out to tackles. I don't know what they're eating up there in Wisconsin, but they got some big boys up front. So it's going to be a game for Tom Allen in terms of what percentage do we want to be in 2 high safety? What percentage do we want to be in 1 high safety? And, how the flow of the game goes. If we feel good in the beginning of the game about defending the run in 2 high, okay, then we can stick to it more and try to eliminate those guys. But, okay, do we decide to man these guys up and say, look, you're going to be the one who has all the onus, and you're going to have to be the one to win your one-on-one rep and do that to the corners? So we're going to see how this game plays out, but it's definitely a very interesting matchup for this Penn State defense.
So you bring up, traditionally a great run game, a front 5 that gets pushed. They're big, they're strong, they're physical.
Huge.
And you're not wrong, man. I mean, you think about, right, like the U's, right? Like the linebacker U, wide receiver U, and things like that. Wisconsin might have claim to a conversation in offensive line U. If we're having that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like big old farm boys that just look like they've been lifting their whole lives, like just giants, man. 6'7", 6'8", and they like them like that all the way across the board, man. They just smother you. They play hard. They got grit. They're tough. Yeah, that
So
was always an O-line I
um,
respected a
I'm
lot.
I'm curious because now you've talked about the Wisconsin O-line, and in contrast, I remember you saying a couple of weeks ago, I forget if it was Army or Navy, but you said it was one of the more like physical, like hurt from you were sore the next day
Oh
standpoint
yeah.
because
Wisconsin's
they
definitely
just
one of those
chop
games
block
too.
and they get at your knees. What's the difference? Obviously, you're still going to be sore, but like, what's the difference between the quick, athletic, kind of cut you down line versus the one that's just going to bulldoze you?
Because the thing with those is like you don't want to, like, as a linebacker, you don't want to have a wrestling match with this dude. Like I'm 235. I probably played my junior senior on 235, 232. Like these guys are all 310 pounds plus, so they all got almost 100 pounds on you. So you don't want to get in an arm wrestling match with these guys. So you want to play your blocks right, and the timing of everything matters when they're that much bigger. Because if you just try to go head to head with these guys, I mean, they're going to win that all day. So you got to be strategic about the way you approach your blocking styles and block destruction as a linebacker and things of that nature. Like that really, really plays a factor. It truly does.
So behind that offensive line, of course, is a great run game, and that is Wisconsin's bread and butter, has been for a long time. I mean, you can run off the list of guys just in the last 10 to 15 years that have gone to the NFL and had success in the NFL after, pretty successful, maybe even historic at times, collegiate seasons. And Tawee Walker is the next running back up on that list. And he's kind of become a problem for opposing defenses, and he wasn't getting the bulk of the touches early in the year. And Luke Fickell talked in his post-game presser the other day. I think it was maybe it was his Monday, midweek press conference, and he basically, without admitting it, was like, "Yeah, we got to get this guy more touches. Like we did not do a good enough job at the beginning of the season of getting him carries." He brought up like the 18 to 20 range, which I think is low for a star running back collegiately, period. But it also almost seems really low for a Wisconsin team that is historically a run the football team offense.
Yeah. You'd think a staple of Wisconsin team was their running backs getting 30 carries, a game, because that's just how they play it. But yeah, he's definitely starting to catch on, and I don't necessarily think he's like uber super talented. I just think he makes all the right plays. I think he runs hard. I think he sees the field really well and makes the right cuts and things of that nature. And he's always falling forward. And that's kind of been the mentality of that team. So I think these guys have really rallied around him, and he's come up with a couple of big games, 200+ yard games this season already. So he's their workhorse, and they know it.
So we gave you a kind of a crazy stat about a quarterback drought. How about this one? He became the latest in a long line of Wisconsin running backs to rush for 2 touchdowns in 3 consecutive games. Here's the last 5 to do it: Monty Ball, James White, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor, and now Walker. Wow. Pretty good company to keep amongst those list.
It's a real nice list. They definitely have an argument for RBU, that's for sure.
All NFL caliber type running backs to different extents and different talent levels. Obviously, Braylon Allen joins the fold this year with the Jets, another guy who just had a really good Wisconsin career. But I think that Walker has been really awesome, and I'm surprised that that you say maybe he's not the most gifted of the group. And I think Jonathan Taylor, to me, and maybe you can say differently, of that group we just listed, I think Jonathan Taylor is the most electric, the most explosive, the most dynamic, but all have merits within their own right. I am actually a little bit surprised to say maybe for you to say maybe he's not as explosive, as gifted, but he just makes all the right plays.
Yeah, honestly, I'd argue that Melvin Gordon might be the most talented out of that group. Melvin, I've trained with Melvin. Melvin is super twitchy, super explosive, really strong. I know JT is too as well, and JT's got a really great high-end speed, and that's what I mean. I feel like there's something about all of those guys. I can say that I feel like their skill in that category is elite. There's no one skill that I look at Tawee Walker's game and I think he's elite in this. besides maybe decision making, which is a big part of playing running back, is setting up your blocks and making the right cuts and reads in terms of going through the right holes and stuff of that nature. But I'll also put this out there because I felt like in the USC game, this was a concern, is how much gap scheme we got schemed up in the run game against USC and how much misdirection kind of got us. And Wisconsin is traditionally a great zone team, outside zone, inside zone. They are very much so a duo team. They love big double teams and get you off the football and let those old linemen come off late to those linebackers. That's kind of always been the team that they are. But this year, and especially in this game, I see them doing a lot more gap scheme runs, and I see them watching that USC tape. I'm putting a bit more gap scheme runs on tape just because I feel like there's some bleeding there from our last game against USC.
So we've given a lot of time to the Wisconsin offense, and they've been very, very good. Very quickly, let's talk about the Wisconsin defense as well. Really good through the air, ranked 7th in college football, giving up under 156 yards per game. In the last 3, we talked about how much they've outscored their opponents. They've given up less than 300 passing yards total in the last 3 games. Their run defense has given up 140 per game. They're ranked 61st in college football. I feel like we're a broken record, Jason, when we say this, but another week and another opportunity for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to go get theirs.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, they got a couple of guys, even on the defensive side of the ball. Ricardo Hallman, he's a third-team All-American guy, led college football in picks last season. Hunter Wohler, their safety too. But, I mean, if those are the guys that are making the majority of the tackles, then I feel really good about where Penn State is in the run game, because in the run game, you want the ball to be into the second and to the third level of the defense. So those are the guys who are making the majority of the plays in the run game. That means we're doing a damn good job. And I think this has to be a game for us where we got to really, assert our physicality. And I think these are kind of two teams that are built to the same type of stuff from an identity and culture standpoint. It's more so who's going to do it better and show that we want more on this given day. I think that's what it's going to be about.
I think a really good football game on our hands. Really excited for Saturday's game. We'll talk more about that. We'll recap it next week as we kind of dive deep. Of course, we're going to get into Ohio State. I know you want to talk about one team in particular on the other side, so we'll dive deeper into them. And, of course, we're going to play our superlatives at the end of the show. But first, let me tell you about some of our friends here at Empire Today. You know the jingle. You've heard it for years now. But do you know the company? Do you know what makes Empire Empire? Well, it's their simple shop-at-home convenience, and they're going to take the guesswork out of this. When you're looking for floors, whether it be hardwood, carpet, tile, maybe you're looking for something a little bit different to spice up your home, there are thousands of options to choose from. But what Empire does is they're going to make it simple. They are going to take the guesswork out of it. And what they're going to do is help you shop at home with their virtual floor design. It's one of the great ways to see how your floor is going to look in any space. So all you're going to do is snap a picture of the room you're looking to put new floors in, whether it be your kitchen, your living room, your bathroom, whatever the case may be. You snap a quick picture of that space, put it into the virtual floor design, and you will get thousands of samples to show you what your perfect style is going to be. Listen, shopping for floors at a big box store can be frustrating because it's overwhelming. They're going to talk at you, not to you. They just want to get the job done. But what Empire does is all about flooring. They want to make sure you're happy. They want to make sure the customer service portion of this is what sticks, because you might buy something from another store, but if you're not happy with the service, you're not coming back. Empire knows that, and they want to make you and your family and your friends repeat customers. So schedule a free in-home estimate today, and all listeners will receive $350 off when they use the promo code PHLY. Restrictions do apply. Head on over to empiretoday.com/PHLY for more details. And yes, while we talk about things that are awesome, let me tell you about our friends and us over at PHLY, because it's never been a better time to become a diehard than right now. You're going to get all of the podcasts and the live shows and some of the best written content, but if you become a diehard, you're going to get even more exclusive premium content. Fran Duffy has joined the fold, and his breakdowns each and every week of the Philadelphia Eagles is only found for the diehard members, because it's just amazing, amazing work. And, of course, you're going to get great work from the Sixers crew, who tip off next week. Charlie O'Connor and the Flyers crew, who started the Flyers season this past 2 weeks ago, I should say. You'll also get opportunity for incredible merch and 20% off all of our paid live events. But if that's not enough, you're also going to get a free shirt when you sign up to become a member, and you can join our members-only Discord, which we call the PHLY Lounge. So head on over to allphly.com and join some of the best sports fans in the city by becoming a diehard today. Jason, Tyler, that's Jason Cabinda, by the way. I'm Tyler Zulli. This is the All Nittany Lion podcast. Adam Telefaro will be back with us next week. Jason, I wanted you to kind of take the reins on this one a little bit, because you texted me and said, I want to talk about one team specifically. And that one team specifically is Deion Sanders, Travis Hunter's, Shedeur Sanders, Colorado football team. So I'm curious your thoughts, because this is one thing you definitely wanted to get into today.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about them. I mean, when they were doing so bad last year, everybody wanted to, yell at Colorado, say this and that about Deion. And, oh, they conduct themselves this way. They're too cocky. They're too this. Well, now that they're in a groove that this Colorado program hasn't been in I don't even know how many years, why are we talking about it? That's all I'm saying. Shedeur Sanders looks great. I feel like every single week we're gassing up these other teams. I mean, we're talking about this Colorado-Arizona game. Everybody's like, oh, Arizona's going to whoop Colorado. Colorado, they just this and they just that. And then Colorado comes out and whoops them 34-7. Shedeur Sanders, looks like he might be the first quarterback taken off of the board this year. I mean, let's talk about it. Travis Hunter, we still don't know what position he's even going to play next year. We just know he's probably going to be a first-round guy, regardless of the side of the ball. I mean, dude, there's a lot to like about this Colorado team. They're finishing teams. Deion's keeping it as real as ever. His son Shiloh had a terrible game the other day when he had come back off of his injury of his wrist. Deion got asked about him in the press conference. Deion said, you know what? Shiloh looked terrible. He said he played awful. And mind you, Deion did this earlier the year before, and everybody said, like, oh, he's throwing players under the bus, because he was ridiculing how they played. And he kept it up 100%, 100. And he let the reporters know that I don't think they play well at all. And everybody said, oh, he's throwing them under the bus. Well, when he did it to his son, nobody was saying anything. He did the same thing. Regardless of who it was, his son got brought up. He still said the same thing and kept it 100% real. And then what did his son do next game? Has a pick, has a turnover in the game, a lot of tackles. So I just feel like this team is really feeding off Deion's energy. He's real. They know that who he is who he is all the time. Don't matter what it looked like. It don't matter what's happening on the outside, the noise. We don't care about it. We only care about what's going on in this building. Those teams are the ones that thrive. So I'm happy Colorado's making this turnaround. I wanted to give him a big shout out during this show.
So last year they have the big explosive win out the gate. They go and beat TCU at TCU. Honestly, it was a really good football game. Yeah. And then things started to kind of crumble from there. They finished 4-8. They probably didn't have the depth of talent that was necessary. You brought up a couple of guys, and they are the high-end talent. Travis Hunter is the best player in college football, I think. To be able to do what he does, you've marveled at it in shows past, where to play 90, 100 snaps a game is off the charts crazy. Yep. Shedeur Sanders is continuing to get better. Last year they finished 4-8. This year they're already at 5-2. They've already surpassed their record from a season ago. If they win any game in the next 5, which they will, they're going to win a 6th game. It'll be their most wins since 2016 when they won 10. It'll also be the first year that they're bowl eligible since that same 2016 team. To take it even a step further, Colorado as a program has only won 6 games or more 3 times. This would be the 4th if they do it this year, since 2005, in the last basically 20 seasons. I think the one thing that people maybe get misconstrued, because Deion is at the forefront of things, and like you said, maybe some people view it as throwing his players under the bus. Some people view it as being real. I think there's a misconstruction of this team is supposed to be elite right away because they got a great quarterback, they got a great player, and they've got a prestigious head coach. There was a lot of building that needed to be done for this Colorado program, which a year prior had won a single game. They won 4 last year. They're already at 5 this year. That's incremental progress that has been made is pretty significant.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up the statistics about Colorado and about, all the way back dating from 2016 and even 2005. Because like it's not like they were on the brink of being average. Like, no, these were like terrible, terrible teams. Since 2016, like 1-win teams, 2-win teams. Like these were teams where the culture was just lost and embracing a loser mentality, and it was becoming the norm. Like to come in situations like that and change that takes so much more than just players and coming in and making a few rah-rah speeches. Like you truly have to regrow the culture all the way from the ground up. That is tough to do. It takes glue guys. It takes an enormous level of accountability. It takes people on all levels to all be on the same page, and all be rowing the boat in the same direction. Everybody believing in what you're preaching while you're going through all of the tough times and the tough losses it's going to take to turn the page on that program, which they went through last year. They went through those aches and pains. And at the end of that year, Deion came in and said, look, I promise you guys aren't going to be sitting here laughing next year. So I'm going to have the last laugh. And that's what it's looking like right now. And people, because of the society that we live in right now, everybody wants to be instantly gratified and just think that things are going to happen in a snap. Man, that's not how life works. And you're showing how this is the process. This is how it goes. And they're sticking to it, and they're believing in him.
By the way, that 2016 Colorado team that we referenced as the last one to really have a sustainability of success sent 6 players to the NFL the following couple of years. Headline: Philip Lindsay had one really awesome year with Denver. Went to the NFL. Chidobe Awuzie has been in the NFL. Ahkello Witherspoon has been pretty darn good for a long time now. There was some legit talent on that Colorado team, that 2016 team, and it never really replenished itself until recently. And I think that there is a lot of people because Deion's boisterous or they came in and they said this is what our program is going to be. A lot of people were like, thinking about maybe it's a little too soon to be confident, borderline, maybe a little bit cocky. But I think that the incremental growth is just as significant as having the big name players, because I think the point that this program wants to try to make is just because we have a potential first round pick at quarterback and a first round pick at wide receiver and corner, we want more than that. We want sustainability. We want sustained success once these guys are gone. So as you continue to grow, your recruiting classes will grow, and you'll get guys that are you're going to round out your depth at an even greater rate. This may just be a step. You know what I mean? 5-2 may just be a step, and the next one could be sustainably ranked, and the next one could be competing for the Big 12 championship, and you take steps and steps and steps to sustainability.
Absolutely, and I think once Shedeur Sanders leaves Colorado, I think we're going to have to temper expectations again whenever that transition happens in quarterback, or maybe, Deion makes a huge splash in the quarterback portal, which is the beauty of the NIL and the transfer portal now is like, man, you can get a guy who can come in and be ready and can change the program the same way a guy like Shedeur can. So you never know. But I do know that Shedeur is probably the top 1 or 2 quarterbacks that come off the board, which is going to be a huge loss for that team. But man, like the talent is there. They're bringing in classes, the prestige of the Deion Sanders and the prime time and what he brings and how it looks like he cares for his players is clearly shining through in that program right now.
Yeah, I'll give you bring up potentially hitting the portal. I'll give you a name that has transformed a program. Cam Ward. Ward this year transfers to Miami.
Oh, yeah. And
they are 7-0. He's in the Heisman conversation. He's been awesome. Everything that they've wanted him to be and more. He's 24-5, I believe. Quarterback to interception, touchdown to interception ratio. He adds the ability with his legs to be a legit dual threat quarterback. He's changed the mindset of that team for this season, and he's going to go on to the NFL, and then Miami's going to have to find another quarterback. But that's the life of college football. That's nothing new. It's just how you maybe get the player is the new aspect of this thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's why, these schools are all – it's about competing in everything you do, on the field, off the field, and NIL, because at the end of the day, like all the fundraising, the things that go into that, that's to make the program better, get better players. And At the end of the day, it's the players who go out there on the field and play. So if you ain't got the best ones off rip, it's going to be tough for you to be the best team out there. So you got to compete.
So we'll continue to monitor everything around the college football landscape, but I do want to play this game with you before we get out of here because I like playing the superlative game because I think it allows for open-ended conversation, and you and I can go back and forth on what our thoughts are. So I've got a list. I got a list of questions here. You give me your answer. You can. I'll give you mine. We'll go back and forth, and we'll get out of here for the day. The first question: who is the most surprising team so far of the 2024 college football season?
Surprising. That's a tough one. You go first.
So
what do you got?
I think the immediate answer that jumps to my head are the two military academies. But I ended up going with a different team. I went with BYU. BYU is 7-0 after moving into the Big 12 not too long ago. They have 2 wins against ranked opponents already. They have 5 wins against Power 5 schools already. They're one of just the 10 remaining undefeated teams left in college football. And Jake Ratzliff has been awesome for them. He's their leading passer. He's their leading rusher. And BYU just survived a big, shootout game in dramatic fashion against Oklahoma State the other day to improve to 7-0. This team is just putting points up on the board. They've been really good this year. They dropped 38 on a ranked Kansas State team. They dropped 40 on that Arizona team you mentioned earlier in the show, and 38 last week against Oklahoma State. They're scoring points, man.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. That's a really good one. They're balling. They actually are balling. BYU. It's so weird with these teams because like they have these random years where like they're just like, yo, like the Zach Wilson teams and like teams like that. It's just like damn, they could come out of nowhere with it. I'm actually gonna do a surprise team in the opposite direction. Mine's actually gonna be USC. I actually thought USC was, and I still think they're a good team. I just thought they would have it more figured out than they do. I think they dropped some games, and I thought their confidence levels kind of now dropped, losing to Minnesota now. Because, I mean, they came out hot, having a really impressive win against a tough LSU team and in great fashion. The energy was right. They dropped a tough one to Michigan. And then I just kind of felt like they let the snowball keep getting bigger and bigger, and it kind of turned into an avalanche that it didn't really need to turn into. Obviously, the Penn State loss was a really tough, emotional loss. To lose that one at home in overtime. That one was a gut punch, but they didn't rebound from it the way I thought that they would. So I'm going to go with USC.
All right, so you may have actually just answered my next question because the next question was, who is the most disappointing team so far this year?
Yeah.
And you can go with USC, and I love it. I'm going to go with Florida State with this question. Ranked inside the top 10 to start the year. They're 1-6 now at the end, through 7 games. They got embarrassed by SMU, embarrassed by Boston College. Their one win is against Cal. They've scored 21 points or less in every game this year. DJ Uiagalelei just has not been good as their quarterback. I think they're really running into some hard times at Florida State right now. So to me, if you start within the top 10 and you have like legitimate aspirations and you're 1-6, I have to go with Florida State.
Yeah, that's honestly a great answer. Honestly, I think it's an embarrassing team, to be real with you. When I watch their film and I see some of the effort levels by some of the players and some of the body language that I see on the sideline, on the field, it is an embarrassing program right now. It's not a team that believes in each other. It's not a team that trusts each other, trusts what the coach's vision is. That one is a complete question mark to me because I just don't understand how that meltdown could happen that quickly and just that. It's just a lot of stuff doesn't make sense when I watch Florida State.
Yeah, I think that there is a probably large portion of Florida State fans who have Googled Mike Norvell buyout price in the last couple of weeks. And I'm not so sure it's Mike Norvell's entirely his fault right now.
Nah, it can't be. They've got way too many issues, going on over there.
By the way, Adam Telefero checked in for the most surprising team. Provolone John in the comments section echoed the same team. Adam said Indiana, 7-0 Indiana. They have scored 300 plus points this year already. Jason, they're just like steamrolling teams.
Yeah, Indiana. I'll give it to them, and they've got a coach that clearly believes. They came from JMU, a very winning culture, winning program. He ended up grabbing a ton of transfers from that winning JMU team over to Indiana. They got a really explosive offense. Receivers are playing well. They've got a quarterback that's playing better than I think we thought he would come into the season playing. And it's a team that has a lot of confidence right now. That's always the dangerous team. They could easily end up 11-1 by the end of the season. Who knows where they'll be ranked? But I cannot say I'm an Indiana believer. I think when the going gets real, I'm not sure the going has gotten real for them just yet. But when it does, I don't think they'll show up.
All right, I think this one might be an obvious answer, but I'm curious your thoughts. Halfway through, who's your Heisman winner?
Ashton Jeanty.
That's what I figured.
It's between him and Travis. It's so tough because what Ashton's doing hasn't been done in 25 plus years. But at the same time, what Travis is doing is the type of stuff we haven't seen since Charles Woodson and some of those type of players too. So it's a tough one. I think this will be one of those ones where it'll probably come down to which team ends up having a better season is probably who the award will end up going to. Colorado goes and wins out and ends up being 10-2 end of season bowl game winners. It'll probably be Travis Hunter. If Ashton Jeanty's team, are they undefeated right now?
I believe they're 5-1.
Oh, they're 5-1. Yeah, they're. I don't see an argument for a better out of Power 5 conference team than Boise State to have an argument if they win out this season to get into the college football playoff and see Ashton Jeanty in the college football playoff atmosphere. So. Is
it fair to suggest right now, if the season ended today, the three of the guys going to Radio City Music Hall would be Hunter, Jeanty, and Cam Ward?
Yeah, that's pretty safe. I'm not completely locked in on Cam Ward being the quarterback because this has been a quarterback award. So I think there's still 2-3 quarterbacks that are kind of in the mix for that in general right now. But yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the draft. I know we're a long ways away from the draft, but if the NFL draft were to happen tomorrow, now obviously it would change with who has the number 1 overall pick. It looks like right now it could be New England. Cleveland may have some claim to it as the season progresses. If the season ended today and the NFL draft was tomorrow, who would be the number 1 overall pick in the draft?
Well, I think you're seeing some teams who are looking for some better quarterback plays. I think it's definitely going to be a quarterback that comes out first. It's going to be, I think, in my opinion, it's Shedeur. I think he does. I think he's so poised, and he's had that in his game for a long time. The level of pocket presence that he has a great arm. His arm is live. I think mentally he's all there from being able to really understand an NFL offense and do checks, protection, and have a command. There's just something about he's got a moxie to him that you'd love to see him lead an organization. So I think for me, it's Shedeur Sanders. Cam Ward, there's still some question marks for me about who I feel like he might be as a player. I don't feel like he's as out there as Shedeur, so I see more of Shedeur more than Cam Ward. As right now, it would be Shedeur Sanders.
So I wrote who it should be and then who it will be in my notes. And I said who it should be is Travis Hunter. He's the best player in college football. But more times than not, you're not taking a corner or a wide receiver as the number 1 overall pick. Maybe both changes that aspect of it a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
Not a position that's historically been taken number 1 overall. To me, I said who it will be is either a quarterback or Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU. Tackles tend to go pretty high in the draft as well.
Yeah, that's true.
For example, if New England ends up with the number 1 pick, they're pretty comfortable with Drake May, at least for another season. Maybe they take a tackle or something like that.
Right.
How many Penn Staters get drafted on day 1?
On day 1, round 1?
Yes, just round 1.
I think one or two have a chance.
Okay. I have two. I think Abdul Carter's a lock to be a first round pick.
Yeah.
And I think Drew Aller ends up being a first round pick this year as well.
Really?
I do. I think probably mid-tier first round, back end teens, high 20s, probably like the fourth quarterback off the board. But I do think that Drew Aller has a chance to be a first round pick this year.
I think that is around which quarterback he is. I don't think it's going to be that many quarterbacks that come off that and all in the first round like that. It might be, but we'll see. That's an interesting one.
One final question for you. We have many weeks left to play. This answer could change a ton of times. Midway through the season, who wins the national championship this year?
I love it. Who wins the Natty this year if it were to be decided today?
So today, I believe your four buys would be Oregon. It would be Georgia. It would be, excuse me, I'm going to try to go back and try to quickly do this. It would be Oregon, Georgia. I've lost it. I had it, and now I believe I do not have the standings anymore. It would be Clemson would get a bye, and BYU would get a bye.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, obviously a lot to change, of course. But those would be your four buys as of right now.
That's tough. Honestly, built to do it, I think either UGA or us, honestly,
okay.
I think are built to do it. As in last through, can stay healthy, play a style of football that can last that late in a season. I think Coach K, what he can continue to do offensively and keeping the offense fresh throughout the year, I think we're hard to figure out. I think either us or UGA. And I think that it's our time. I think that confidence is building to that point where, we're starting to believe who we know we are,
Yeah, for sure. Georgia was one of the teams I've written down. I have been saying for a very long time, maybe my thoughts have wavered a little bit. So Josh Simmons, the left tackle, gets hurt last week. And I don't know how do you replicate your starting left tackle who's been so good. But I've been saying Ohio State for a really long time, and it makes me kind of ill to my stomach to say that Ohio State has a legitimate national championship contention. Will Howard's been much better than I expected him to be. He's done a good job of protecting the football. Silly decision aside to slide in the middle of the field with no time left. But I think that that's a really good football team. I would say my two right now are Ohio State and Georgia.
Okay. Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of time left. So things are going to change. Who's going to get a bye? The top four teams, of course, get a bye. The highest ranked group of five team gets in, and then it's a bunch of at-larges from there. So a ton of time left. But we'll reevaluate this at the end of the season to see if we had anything right, if we had everything right. But only time will tell over the next couple of weeks. But I can tell you that we are, in fact, out of time for this episode of the All Nittany Lion podcast. So everybody that interacted in the chat, so Provolone John and Eastern Vikings Football Classic, appreciate you as well. Everybody that watched and tuned in, whether you do it live or you do it post-show, thank you as well. And a big thank you, of course, to the man on my right. That's Jason Cabinda. Adam Telefero will be back next week as well. For those two guys and myself, Tyler Zulli, we thank you for tuning in. We thank you for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday as we get you set for the biggest game of – oh, real quick, before we get out of here, Jason, 90 seconds or less. Why is it stupid that this next week's game is at noon?
Oh Lord, it's stupid because you don't allow the environment to fully build, man. And like these 12 o'clock games, like there's something about the night games in Ohio State, Penn State, and a rivalry game where it needs to be at night because there's a certain level of buildup, a certain level of tension throughout the day. You get the full tailgate experience, like. All that needs to happen for a game like this, and Big Noon doesn't allow the opportunity for that to happen.
There you go. It should be a 7:30 start. There'd be an opportunity for a whiteout. There would be an opportunity, as you said, for the full, especially late fall. It's still nice enough. You're
full
outside,
Beaver effect.
tailgating. It's a beautiful time in Happy Valley, and Big Noon kickoff ruined it. So thanks, Fox. Appreciate you. But for everybody here on the show, Jason Cabinda, myself, Adam Telefero, who will be back next week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here on the All Nittany Lion podcast. And we will talk to you next week at 4 p.m. Hope to talk to you then.
We all silly like the man.